to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Bangkok, Thailand. Hello, Faye.
Hello, Alma. This is Faye Barte bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines.
In our transformation plans.
In an hour-long speech, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. delivered a data-driven State of the Nation address that laid out his plans for the country for the 6 years coming. Bangkok is now on full alert for a monkeypox after a Nigerian man who went on the run after becoming the country's first monkeypox case was found in Phnom Penh. The first critics to be put to death by Myanmar's junta in decades were figureheads of the country's long struggle for democracy. A veteran campaigner who spent years in prison for his beliefs and a hip-hop pioneer harnessing the hopes of a new generation, and condemnations poured in. Indonesian President Joko Widodo has arrived in Beijing and will have bilateral meetings with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. First in our news, the use of renewable energy is at the top of President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr.'s agenda in fighting climate change. In his maiden State of the Nation address, he noted that investment in science and technology is imperative to enable the government to give accurate weather forecasts and on-time disaster alerts. Let's listen in.
In our transformation plans, geographically, we are a disaster-prone country. Capacity building for our natural disaster resiliency is therefore a must. Investment in science and technology is imperative to enable us to have accurate weather forecasts and on-time disaster alerts. Studies show that already now, many areas in the Philippines are at high risk from the rise in sea levels brought about by the increase in global temperature. We must adapt to this phenomenon with disaster-proof planning for our communities. We will also look into the precarious fresh water supply situation in the country, especially in our urban areas. Many of our water supply systems date back to the 1950s, and they must now be rehabilitated and improved. I've instructed the DNR, together with the DPWH, to explore possible partnerships with the private sector to address this crucial situation. The Philippines has excellent laws on the environment, but we have to guarantee that these laws are properly enforced. And this will require a great deal of coordination and cooperation between concerned government agencies and private stakeholders. Companies who exploit our natural resources must follow the law. We all have the responsibility to preserve this earth, for we are but custodians and we will pass on this great treasure to future generations. There is no question that the preservation of the environment is the preservation of life. If we cannot mitigate climate change, all our plans for the economy, all our plans for our future will be for naught.
And building new power plants, the use of renewable energy, and bringing down the price of electricity to consumers are the priorities of President Marcos Jr. in the next 6 years of his administration. The president said there's a need to examine the entire system of transmission and distribution for the purpose of finding ways to lower the price of energy to the consumer public. Take a look.
In our transformation plans, another fundamental requirement for growth and increased employment will be the availability of cheap, reliable energy. This even comes under the category of ease of doing business. If we are to attract investors, both local and foreign, to set up shop here in the Philippines, At present, our demand for energy far exceeds our reliable supply. We must increase the level of energy production. We must look at every possible option that would be appropriate for the Philippine situation. There is some room to expand our present power supply through existing power sources, but this is only to a very limited extent. We must build new power plants. We must take advantage of all the best technology that is now available, especially in the areas of renewable energy. Our search for new power sources should always be with an eye to improving the mix of the energy supply between traditional and renewable sources. The technology on renewable energy is progressing rapidly, and many of these technologies are appropriate for the Philippines. We have already begun windmill power. We are now expanding very quickly our solar power production. For both offshore and onshore wind turbines, for example, the World Bank has calculated that there is a potential for 255 gigawatts by the year of 2030. Solar power has steadily increased its efficiency in converting sunlight to electrical power, which is particularly attractive for the Philippines. Because unlike wind power, solar power is practical almost everywhere in the Philippines all year round. In the move to lowering our carbon footprint caused by energy production, our advancement to renewables will have a lead time. In the interim, natural gas will hold the key. We will provide investment incentives by clarifying the uncertain policy in upstream gas, particularly in the area close to Malampaya. This requires clarification of the processes and review of service contracts policy. I believe that it is time also to re-examine our strategy towards building nuclear power plants in the Philippines. We will comply, of course, with the International Atomic Energy Agency regulations for nuclear power plants as they have been strengthened after Fukushima. In the area of nuclear power, there have been new technologies developed that allow smaller-scale modular nuclear plants and other derivations thereof. Once again, PPPs will play a part in support as funding in this period is limited. Furthermore, we must examine the entire system of transmission and distribution for the purpose of finding ways to lower the price of energy to the consumer and to industry. We must expand the network of our transmission lines while examining schemes to improve the operation of our electrical cooperatives. All this in aid of reducing energy costs, especially but not limited to households.
And meanwhile, President Marcos ordered the Department of Migrant Workers in ensuring the welfare and even the employment of Filipinos abroad. He pushed for digital empowerment among OFWs, and he also ordered to remove all red tape in government procedures. Let's listen in.
In our transformation plans, bawat Pilipino sa ibayong dagat na nagsasakripisyong lisanin ang kanyang pamilya sa Pilipinas upang maghanap buhay ay nararapat lamang magkaroon ng pamahalaang matatawag nilang tahanan habang nasa ibang bayan. Ito ang papel na gagampanan ng kagawaran ng manggagawang mandarayuhan o Department of Migrant Workers matapos itong ideklara bilang ganap na ahensya ng gobyerno ng isang taon. Ang kagawarang ito ang magsisilbing kanlungan ng ating mga kababayan sa gitna ng mundong walang kasiguruhan at mahigpit na kompetisyon. Ito ang maglalatag sa kanila ng mga oportunidad. Titiyak na ang kanilang mga hanap buhay ay tugma sa kanilang mga kasanayan. Maninigurong akma ang sahod at maayos ang kalagayan sa kanilang mga kumpanya at mga ngalaga sa kanilang mga pamilya habang sila ay nasa malayo. Gagawin natin ito sa pamamagitan ng pag-aalis ng red tape sa sistema ng pagsusulong ng digital empowerment. We shall automate the verification of contracts and issue secure overseas employment certifications that you can keep on your smartphone. I call on the Department of Migrant Workers and the DICT to make this a top priority. Tinatawagan ko rin ang Department of Foreign Affairs na makipagtulungan sa Department of Migrant Workers na tiyakin ang lahat ng mga diplomatic post ay tutulong na agarang maibalik sa trabaho ang mga ating mga overseas Filipino workers na nawalan ng hanap buhay nitong nakalipas na ilang taon. Mula sa 3 buwan ay gagawin na lang nating 3 linggo para sa isang dayuhang employer na iproseso ang mga papeles ng Pilipinas ng Pilipinong nais nitong kunin bilang empleyado. Aatasan din natin ang kagawaran ng gawing simple ang komplikadong handbook ng mga tuntunin at regulasyon para sa mga OFW. Nang sa gayon ay maging malwan ang mga transaksyon may kinalaman sa kanilang pangingibang bansa. Mula sa handbook na may 240 seksyon ay gagawin nating pamphlet na lamang na hindi hihigit sa 100 pahina. Mahirap na nga ang buhay. Kaya naman, ayaw pa natin makitang lalo pang nahihirapan ang ating mga manggagawang mandarayuhan sa pagtupad sa kanilang mga pangarap.
And the president also said that the government will establish a command center intended to provide prompt response to overseas Filipinos in times of crisis abroad. He promised also that under his administration, overseas Filipino workers and their family back home will be protected. Once again, let's listen.
In our transformation plans, para sa mga kababayan nating naiipit sa kaguluhan, inaabuso at nanganganib ang buhay, ikinagagalak kong sa ilalim ng aking pamumuno ay ilulunsad natin ang One Repatriation Command Center o ORCC. Ilalaan natin ang isang social media platform ng Department of Migrant Workers at ang hotline upang matulungan agad at maligtas sila mula sa mas higit na kapahamakan. Noon, nangungutang pa ang isang ina ng bawat OFW upang sumakay ng barko para pumunta sa Maynila at mangatok sa iba't ibang ahensya para mapauwi ang anak na inaapi. Ngayon, kami na ang tatawag sa mga magulang ng OFW para sabihin sa kanila ang petsa kung kailan nila mayayakap at makakapiling ang kanilang mga anak. Sa kasalukuyan ay nakikipag-ugnayan tayo sa pamahalaan ng Saudi Arabia upang buksan muli ang deployment. Kaya natin at gagawin natin ang makipagnegosasyon na mabigyan ang ating mga kababayan doon ng tamang pasahod at mapangalagaan ang kanilang karapatan at kapakanan. Muli natin patitibayin ang respeto at pagkakaibigan ng ating dalawang bansa tulad ng namamagitan sa ating ama sa kanilang hari. Sa mga susunod na buwan ay magtutungo si Secretary Susan Ople sa Saudi Arabia upang tiyakin na may sapat na puwersang magsisiguro na mabubuksan muli ang empleo sa bansa at para maisulong ang ating kampanya laban sa human trafficking. Ngayon, para naman sa mga anak na naiwan sa Pilipinas, titiyakin ng Department of Migrant Workers sa pamamagitan ng OWA na sila ay maipapasok sa magagandang paaralan, magtuturo sa kanila ng financial literacy, mental wellness, sports, sining, kultura, Ito ay mangyayari sa pakikipagtulungan ng iba't ibang ahensya ng pamahalaan. Alagaan natin ang kabataang Pilipino sapagkat sila ang kinabukasan ng ating inambayan. Sa ating mga kababayan na nasa ibang bansa, you deserve a home in government, not only for the money that you send home, but you are not cold tools of the economy. You deserve it for your sacrifices for our country and your perseverance and excellence in the global arena. You OFWs represent the fighting faith of the Filipinos as a nation and as a people. Let us transform your overseas journey into inspirational stories for all time. Thanks to you, our dear legislators, and of course to the man every OFW now refers to as their tatay, President Rodrigo Duterte. You passed the law that created this new home for our OFWs.
Okay, first let's go to Thailand, where a Nigerian man who went on the run after becoming the country's first monkeypox case was found in Phnom Penh Saturday and then taken to hospital. And with that, the capital city hall is on full alert. To tell us more, Jomerl Baldo joins us live from Bangkok. Hello, Jomerl.
Yes, hello, Alma. That is correct. The Bangkok City Hall is now on full alert for monkeypox infections at risk areas in the capital, including locations where foreign tourists gather in large number. Bangkok Governor Chadchat Stinaput called for a meeting on Monday to discuss preparations for the monkeypox infections after the World Health Organization on Saturday considered monkeypox as an official public health emergency of international concern. Speaking after the meeting, Mr. Chadchat said that the public health personnel will be educated about the disease, while health service centers, clinics, and hospitals in Bangkok will be instructed to watch out for anyone suspected of contracting the disease. The Thai Hotel Associations will also be asked to tell all accommodation establishments in Bangkok to report suspected cases to the City Hall's district offices. There is now a heightened surveillance on at-risk communities such as the Soy Nana, where the Nigerian national, the first monkeypox patient, was seen. It is noted that the Nigerian tourist fled to neighboring country Cambodia after he was found to have the disease before being detained there. The migration office in Sakyo said that the Cambodian authorities informed them that the patient is being treated for monkeypox in a hospital in Phnom Penh. According to officials, after the Nigerian man recovers, he will be indicted in a Cambodian court for illegal entry. 27 people who came into close contact with the Nigerian tourist were all tested and the results are all negative. Health officials denied a report that certain strains of monkeypox could spread through the air. It was also added that COVID-19 precautions, such as frequent hand washing and maintaining physical distance, can also be applied to prevent the monkeypox transmission. Dr. Yongpo Vurawan, the head of the Center of Excellence in the Clinical Virology at the Faculty of Medicine in Chulalongkorn University on Monday, posted on his Facebook page that monkeypox is not a serious disease with a fatality rate of less than 0.03%. The disease is also transmitted through close contact, so it is likely to be passed on via sexual activities. On his post, it was said that any disease transmitted through contact during sex is hard to control or eliminate, and so is monkeypox. According to him, the only way is to administer effective vaccines as many people as possible. From EBC, Helen Bureau, I am Jomer, Bundad Baldo, and we live in extraordinary times.
Now back to the SONA of President Marcos. The government will focus on developing and refining people Filipino students' performance. And this will be in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM. During his first State of the Nation address at the Batasang Pambansa Complex in Quezon City, President Marcos Jr. said developing STEM skills further will allow the country to gain a competitive education standing worldwide. Let's listen in.
In the longer term, we are instituting a program of refresher courses and retrainings for our teachers so they can stay abreast of the rapid growth in technology, especially in this post-pandemic world. As for the horror stories that we have heard about the poor quality of educational materials and supplies that are being given to our schools, this must end. Our children must always be equipped with the best that we can provide. Ang edukasyon ay ang tangi nating pamana sa ating mga anak na hindi mawawaldas. Kaya anumang gastusin sa kanilang pag-aaral ay hindi tayo nagtitipid. Hindi rin tayo nagtatapon. And once again, I am not talking about history or what is being taught. I am talking about materials that are necessary for effective teaching in this day and age. Children now need connectivity to the internet. They need devices to use. They need computers, educational tools. We must do better in the international rankings, especially when it comes to the so-called STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. These skills, this knowledge, are necessary for our young people to be able to compete in a highly technological and competitive world. The raw talent is there in our young people. It is up to our educational system to develop and to refine that great pool of talent. The internet has now become the global marketplace, not only for goods, services, but also for ideas, even extending to our own personal interactions. And the language of the internet, for better or for worse, is English. Therefore, the question of our medium of instruction must be continuously re-examined to maintain that advantage that we have established as an English-speaking people.
Meanwhile, President Marcos also said it's time to resume the full implementation of physical classes. The Department of Education, or DepEd, headed by Vice President Sara Duterte, is preparing for academic year 2022-23 with mostly physical classes and blended learning for somewhere face-to-face is not possible. The President thus urged the public to avail of COVID booster shots as their contribution to the efforts for full recovery from the health crisis.
And President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. spoke about his administration's programs for solo parents. Let's take a look.
Hindi rin natin nakakalimutan ang mga solo parents at mga nanay na nahiwalay sa kanilang mga mister dahil sa karahasan. Pagtitibayin natin ang programa sa violence against women and their children. Kabilang na ang counseling para sa mga biktima, katuwang ang ating mga LGU. Tiyakin natin na sapat ang pondo sa halos 70 residential care centers at 7 non-residential care centers para sa vulnerable sectors at persons with disabilities na sumisilong dito.
In the face of the continuing pandemic, the president also pledged that the country will no longer implement COVID-19 lockdowns, adding that it cannot afford to put one in place. Once again, let's listen.
Sa ating sitwasyon ng pangkalusugan, nariyan pa rin ang banta ng COVID-19. Lalo't may mga nadidiscubring bagong variant ng coronavirus. Pero hindi na natin kakayanin ang isa pang lockdown. wala na tayong gagawing lockdown. Patuloy din ang ating vaccine booster rollout para sa ating pangkalahatang depensa. Sa pamamagitan nito, unti-unti rin tayong masasanay na nariyan ang virus pero hindi na seryoso ang banta sa ating buhay. Sa pakikipagtulungan ng Kongreso, itatatag natin ang ating sariling Center for Disease Control and Prevention at ang isang Vaccine Institute. Napakinabangan natin ng husto ang malalaking specialty hospital gaya ng Heart Center, Lung Center, Children's Hospital at National Kidney and Transplant Institute. Kaya maliwanag na hindi lang dapat dito sa National Capital Region kundi maging sa ibang parte ng bansa.
And in terms of health, President Marcos vowed affordable medicines for ordinary people and to build easy-to-reach hospitals and health centers for those living in far-flung areas.
Meanwhile, President Marcos Jr. is also charting an independent foreign policy where the country is a friend to all and an enemy to none. Let's listen in.
On the area of foreign policy, I will not preside over any process that will abandon even 1 square inch of territory of the Republic of the Philippines to any foreign power. With respect to our place in the community of nations, the Philippines shall continue to be a friend to all, an enemy to none. The Philippines has always been open and welcoming to all our foreign friends and visitors. That is our worldview. That is our culture. But let me be clear. We are very jealous of all that is Filipino. We will be a good neighbor, always looking for ways to collaborate and cooperate with the end goal of mutually beneficial outcomes. If we agree, we will cooperate and we will work together. And if we differ, let us talk some more until we develop a consensus. After all, that is the Filipino way. But we will not waver. We will stand firm in our independent foreign policy with the national interest as our primordial guide. We commit to maintaining good relations with the rest of the world. As a matter of fact, it is my sincere belief that the need for strong bonds and collaboration among nations emerges in the direst of times, such as in a pandemic. The partnerships and alliances that we make with all will provide stability that all nations will need as we emerge into this new global economy.
While he seemed to refer to the issue in the West Philippine Sea, President Marcos did not mention it or anything related to it specifically. And also in his speech, President Marcos Jr. repeated his belief and faith in the Filipino spirit and stressed that despite the turbulent times and challenges ahead, he sees sunlight filtering through these dark clouds. Let's listen in.
To my fellow Filipinos, ang aking mga minamahal na kababayan, Batid ko na hindi madali ang ating pinagdaraanan sa nakaraang higit na 2 taon. Alam ko rin na ang bawat isa sa inyo ay ginagawa ang lahat ng inyong makakaya upang patuloy na harapin ang lahat na pagsubok sa kasalukuyan. I do not intend to diminish the risks and the challenges that we face in this turbulent time in global history. And yet, I see sunlight filtering through these dark clouds. We have assembled the best Filipino minds to help navigate us to this global crisis that we are now facing. We will endure. Let our Filipino spirit ever remain undimmed. I know this in my mind. I know it in my heart. I know it in my very soul. The state of the nation is sound. Thank you and good afternoon. Marami pong salamat sa inyong lahat.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Kalimutan mo man ang katotohanan, ika'y masusundan.
Dahil sa ginawa ko na yun, gusto ko siyang kalimutan. Magpakasal na tayo, pero ipangako mo sa akin na poprotektahan mo ko habang buhay. Junseo. Minho.
Tapos na ang lahat. Papunta na ang mga detective.
Hindi na kaya ng papa mo. Tulungan mo siya.
Ipapagawa ko ang transplant ng papa mo. Kung itatago mo ito.
Sa katotohanan, handa ka bang umiwas para buhay ng minamahal
Narito na kami
ay
sa baba.
maligtas?
Nakahanda na.
Fatal Promise.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together. Sa Net 25.
Welcome back. You're still watching ASEAN in Focus, and we're still coming to you live from Manila and Bangkok, Thailand, with Faye Barte. And now, the Myanmar junta's execution of 4 men, including a former member of parliament and a prominent democracy activist, is a sign of the depravity of the Myanmar junta. That is according to Phil Robertson, the Deputy Asia Director at Human Rights Watch, and he called for the international community to look to specific intervention. Let's listen in.
This is clearly a signal to the Myanmar people from the junta that they are prepared to do whatever it takes, whatever rights abuses, whatever atrocities, whatever crimes they think they need to do in order to try to control the situation. They are now moving to execute political prisoners. That is the message today, that we will stop at nothing. It is a sign of the depravity of the Myanmar junta that they are prepared to take this kind of step. Because they have been executed will cause a great deal of anger, frustration, and further determination by the Myanmar people to get rid of this military junta. Because ultimately, there is now a war going on between this military junta and the people of the country. People are no longer prepared to be ruled by this military junta, and this military junta is using absolute force to try to impose its will on the country. So, as I said, we're really moving towards a civil war where the human rights situation is going to get much worse. What we have really seen over the past year is a level of disassociation from the international community. Pushing aside Myanmar, saying that there are other places like Ukraine or other spots that are more important. And they have allowed this situation to get much, much worse. There's been a failure to impose sanctions. There's been a failure to impose a global arms embargo. All the sort of things that we were calling for last year that were absolutely critical to try to constrain a military junta that appears ready to commit crimes against humanity, against its own people in order to assert power. And again, nothing happened. But ASEAN has proved completely unable to cope with the challenge. I mean, ASEAN itself is split right down the middle on how to approach this problem. So it's now time for the international community to take it out of the hands of ASEAN and really look now to some sort of specific intervention that is going to then put the pressure on the military junta, force them to step back, and ultimately, we hope, reach some sort of deal where there can be a new political future for Myanmar.
And staying in Myanmar, UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet today condemned in the strongest terms the execution of 4 democracy activists by Myanmar's military despite repeated calls by the United Nations and the wider international community to not carry out death sentences. The High Commissioner called for the immediate release of all political prisoners and others arbitrarily detained. Let's take a look.
The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, today condemned in the strongest terms the execution of 4 democracy activists by Myanmar's military, despite repeated calls by the United Nations and the wider international community to not carry out death sentences. Ms. Bachelet said that these executions, the first in Myanmar in decades, are cruel violations of the rights of life, liberty, and security of a person, and fair trial guarantees. The High Commissioner called for the immediate release of all political prisoners and others arbitrarily detained. She urged the country to reinstate its de facto moratorium on the use of the death penalty as a step towards eventual abolition.
On July 25, Myanmar state media reported that the military had executed 4 people, including former National League for Democracy or NLD lawmaker Phyo Zayatao, democracy activist Kwao Min Yu, popularly known as Ko Jimmy, Lam Yo Ang, and Ong Tura Zhao were the other 2 men executed. Ko Jimmy and Phyo Zayatao were arrested on October 23 and November 18, 2021, respectively. Ko Jimmy was subsequently charged with sedition. Both Phyo Zayatao and Ko Jimmy were also charged under the counter-terrorism law and sentenced to death by a military tribunal on 21 January of 2022. Their subsequent appeals were denied. Lam Yo Ang and Ong Tora Zhao were convicted on murder charges, and their appeals were also denied. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Monday denounced the Myanmar junta's executions of 4 prisoners as reprehensible and voiced confidence the killings would not hinder the movement for democracy. And these reprehensible acts of violence further exemplify the regime's complete disregard for human rights and the rule of law. And Blinken said in a statement on the executions of a former lawmaker, prominent activist, and 2 others, the regime's sham trials and these executions are blatant attempts to extinguish democracy. These actions will never suppress the spirit of the brave people of Burma, Blinken said, using Myanmar's former name. And the United States joins the people of Burma in their pursuit of freedom and democracy and calls on the region to the respect of the democratic aspirations of the people who have shown they do not want to live one more day under the tyranny of military rule.
In today's other news, Indonesian President Joko Widodo has arrived in Beijing and will have bilateral meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Widodo, host of the Group of 20 Summit or G20 Summit in mid-November, will meet President Xi and Premier Li Keqiang on Tuesday and then hold talks with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida in Tokyo on Wednesday and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol in Seoul on Thursday. China, Japan, South Korea, and Indonesia are all members of the G20, a group of 90 major nations and the European Union. According to Antara News Agency, President Widodo's visit to China on July 25 to 26 will hopefully pave the way for strengthening South-South cooperation. Denpasar-based Chinese Consul General Xu Qinlong has said. Jokowi will be the first head of state to visit China and meet President Xi Jinping after the Winter Olympics, which were held in Beijing in February this year. Qinlong said in an interview transcript published by the Chinese Consulate General in Denpasar, Bali, Indonesia. An unprecedented economic crisis in Sri Lanka has dealt a body blow to a free and universal healthcare system that just months earlier was the envy of the country's South Asian neighbors. Let's take a look.
Even though the doctors and other healthcare workers have morale to work and provide continuous health services for the patients, we are suffering from lack of physical resources. So that has resulted in limiting routine surgeries, routine clinics, and other routine duties and responsibilities. Because of the fuel crisis, patients are unable to come to the hospitals, and healthcare workers are unable to report to the work on time. So this has affected the healthcare delivery to a greatest extent. So many of the patients we receive at the hospital now with late presentations of their disease. So virtually we encounter more emergencies.
Normally per day, if we get 100 prescription, we will return 30 prescription, they will disappointed, no? That is a true story. Because a lot of people are searching some medicine everywhere. Some medicines are not available in the local market. After that, they are going to the doctor, and doctor will change the another medicines, alternative medicine or any other medicines.
Healthcare system is on the verge to collapse. If the situation continues for a few months, next few months, then health system will go into a language stage.
The National Hospital normally caters to people all over the island nation in need of specialist treatment, but it now runs on reduced staff, and many of its 3,400 beds are lying unused. Supplies of surgery equipment and life-saving drugs have been almost exhausted, while chronic petrol shortages have left both patients and doctors unable to travel for treatment. Hyperinflation has driven food prices so high that many households are struggling to keep themselves fed. According to the World Food Program, nearly 5 million people, 22% of the population, need food aid, with more than 5 out of every 6 families either skipping meals, eating less, or buying lower quality food.
An international human rights group has formally asked Singapore to indict Sri Lanka's deposed President Gotabaya Rajapaksa for crimes against humanity during his country's decades-long civil war, and this is according to the officials that was said on Monday. Rajapaksa fled his country earlier this month after his official residence was stormed by tens of thousands of protesters infuriated by the island nation's painful economic crisis. He later escaped to the Maldives in a military plane and traveled on to Singapore, from where he tendered his resignation. Rajapaksa held Sri Lanka's defense ministry while his brother Mahinda was president and was in charge when the country's brutal Tamil separatist conflict came to a bloody end in 2009. Rights groups accuse government forces of killing 40,000 Tamil civilians in a no-holds-barred offensive during the war's final weeks. And once powerful Rajapaksa clan has long maintained that no civilians were killed in crushing a Tamil Tiger separatist movement, resisting repeated international calls for an independent investigation.
Meanwhile, back here in the country, the Quezon City Police District has filed murder and frustrated murder charges against the doctor involved in a shooting incident at the Ateneo de Manila University in Quezon City that killed 3 people and injured 2 others last Sunday, according to the Philippine National Police today. PNP spokesperson Colonel Jean Fajardo said the arrested suspect, Chow Tiao Yumol, a physician, is detained at Camp Karingal and is now facing complaints for 3 counts of murder and frustrated murder in relation to Republic Act 10591 or the Comprehensive Firearms and Ammunition Regulation Act, violation of RA 10883, new Anti-Carnapping Act of 2016, and malicious mischief amounting to 80,000 pesos before the QC prosecutor's office. Fajardo said the QCPD filed a complaint on Monday evening. Killed were former Lamitan City Basilan Mayor Rosita Furigay, her executive assistant Victor George Capistrano, and campus security guard Heneven Bandiala, who reportedly tried to stop the suspect. QCPD Director Brigadier General Remus Medina earlier said Yumol, 38, has a personal grudge against the slain Furigay. Medina said the Furigays had filed 76 cyber libel cases against Yumol. He added that Yumol was unable to practice his medical profession, saying that one of his motivations for committing the crime.
And the directive to subject Filipino nationals to a daily coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 test in Macau is purely a health issue and should not be politicized. The Philippine Consulate General in Macau said this on Saturday. The Macau government earlier ordered any resident who holds a Philippine passport to take a daily nucleic test for July 22 to July 24. And in an advisory, the consulate said the order is solely based on the volume of Filipinos who have caught the disease, which for the past 2 weeks make up 24.5% of the community infection in Macau. To put this issue to rest, the Philippine Consulate General has expressed its agreement to findings shared by the Macau Health Bureau that necessitates the issuance of a directive to our nationals in Macau, it said. And the consulate noted that the same directive had been imposed on other nationals from neighboring countries in the past, and it worked without anyone raising a discrimination issue out of it. And a July 21 report by financial software data and media company Bloomberg quoted health official Leong Ik, who is saying that Filipinos tend to have more gatherings like meetings among friends in Macau. About 30,000 Filipinos reside and work in Macau based on the latest data from the consulate.
And ASEAN launched its first youth dialogue as part of the designation of 2022 as the Year of ASEAN Youth. The first ASEAN Youth Dialogue took place July 25-26 in Siem Reap, Cambodia, with 68 youth delegates participating from across the region and the Republic of Korea. Let's take a listen.
We are a leadership and entrepreneurship education charity. making quality character education accessible and available to all youth, regardless of their background or availability or accessibility. Joining me at this panel are some illustrious panelists, youth panelists, people who are young and making amazing change and doing some amazing things with the initiatives and organizations that they've been part of. Obviously, yes, most of us are scattered across ASEAN, and we have our friends from Republic of Korea as well. So this is a good snapshot of where we are.
So yeah, currently I'm building my own organization that I've built since 2019 called The Study Friend. So The Study Friend is a youth-led education-focused organization using a peer-to-peer approach where we dedicate to build a safe environment to learn. So what we're doing is we are trying to provide free educational resources for mostly high school students and also people that are going to universities.
I joined EYAA in 2018 and the ASEAN Youth Social Journalism Contest in 2019. And I'm very happy and honored to be here. It's my first time to be a speaker.
I'm currently working as a strategic planner at Dancer Redder. It's an advertising agency in Vietnam. But I do believe, like, in a way that advertising and commercial, we not only sell products or things or brands, we can also sell changes and transformation.
The ASEAN Secretariat, or ASEC, and the Cambodian Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport jointly organized a dialogue with support from the ASEAN-Korea Cooperation Fund under the 9th ASEAN-Korea Frontiers Forum. The areas to be addressed in the dialogue align with priorities under Cambodia's ASEAN chairmanship this year and the theme ASEAN ACT, or Addressing Challenges Together. In Theme RIP, youth delegates will engage in a face-to-face dialogue with ASEAN youth ministers and high-level officials on youth empowerment, participation in pandemic recovery, and regional integration. And there are 8 thematic areas shaping the recommendations and dialogue, namely governance, science, technology and innovation, the future of work, infrastructure and connectivity, inclusive and sustainable growth, climate change, narrowing the development gap in ASEAN, and people-to-people exchanges. And with that, we end today's broadcast. Thank you very much, Faye Barte from our Bangkok, Thailand Bureau, for keeping me company today. And thank you.
Thank you also, Alma. Once again, this is Faye Barte from your EBC Thailand Bureau. Thank you for watching news in the Extraordinary Times.
And we'll see you back tomorrow. Same time, same place here on ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good day.